Welcome. I'm Rielly Karsh.
I'm Tovah Copan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast. We are, as always, very, very excited to have you with us on the show. And this is the final episode of season 7. I can't really believe it. I feel like it went super fast and slow at the same time. It's one of those kind of like Bermuda Triangle of time experiences for me.
Life.
You know, like as all things seem to be. But we are going to wrap up our season on embracing our power today. Before we dive in, I will welcome to the show, as I always do, my fantastical, magical, mystical, wonderful co-host, Tovah. How are you today, Tovah? What's happening? What's going on? Talk to me.
Yeah, I'm okay. I am good, I think even. We are recording this the week prior to you listening to this, so we are very much in the throes of the holiday excitement, and I am eagerly awaiting this afternoon when I will be putting my away message up for work. And let me be clear, I will not be not working. I still have work to finish before the end of the year, but there's something so freeing about being like, listen, I'll get to your email when I get to it. Like, and just having that sort of understanding with the email sender.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I'm excited. I'm counting down the hours, knowing that in sales, the end of the year is not really the best time to take off, but I do anyway. And just try to get as much done as I can, and then put that little away message up.
Excellent.
There's power in away messages.
There absolutely there is. So we are, like I said, this is our last episode of season 7, which feels a little like I'm a little sad this time to be moving on from embracing our power, although I'm not actually moving on from embracing my power. I'm just moving on from talking about it constantly. And we thought today we would focus on a couple of things. Mainly, as you all know, if you've been following along this season, we've been interviewing some really amazing women and talking to them about their experience with embracing their power and sort of their their lifetime of experience of how that has shaped their lives and what it's looked like and how they've gotten to where they are and all of those fun things. And so we thought today we would take some time with you all and talk about some of the questions that we asked those interview subjects in with respect to our own lives, because obviously we wrote the questions and we were curious enough to ask other people, and we haven't gone through the process of talking to you all very directly about those questions with respect to ourselves. So we're not going to interview each other this time, but we are going to talk through some of the more pertinent questions that we have asked other folks on the show. So without further ado, let's get to it. Let's dive in. And I think the first thing I wanted to raise when Tovah and I were talking about this is like, why did we even start this season? Like, what was our thought process in talking about embracing our power? Like, who cares? And I think it's probably self-evident, right? Like, who cares? Why do we need to embrace our power? What's the big deal? And as with everything, like almost everything we talk about on the show, but certainly more specifically in our coaching and in our group, in our various groups that we have, in our courses, everything we do comes back to figuring out who you are. And that's your inner voice, and like taking the time to understand yourself and bring that self out into the world and being comfortable enough and secure enough and I don't want to say strong enough, but like capable enough and willing to risk being vulnerable enough to bring that person out into the world and figuring out how to do that while, knowing that there will be people who reject that person, who don't like that person, who don't support who that person is or what they stand for.
Yeah.
And that part is, I think, the scary part. And that's what we've been talking about for 7 seasons at this point.
Well, and I think, something that I've known, learned, or relearned, or I'm not sure the experience that I've had, but when it comes to embracing your power, like just like everything else, it is I don't want to say a moving target, but it's something that you have to continually do. Like it's not as if one day you've like embraced your power and then that's it. Like there are going to be many times that you don't feel powerful, or there are many times that you don't feel like you are putting out your most authentic self, where you get caught up in, I don't want to say feelings of vulnerability, because I actually, now I'm jumping ahead, but have like, at least in the last couple of years, I feel most powerful when I am able to acknowledge my vulnerability. So I don't want to say that, but there are definitely times when you're in a situation, and maybe it's a situation that flashes you back to something that you've experienced in previous times, or where you just feel like you're not powerful and you're not using your voice and you're just trying to get by. And so I think that something that was interesting as we talked to all of these women this season is, no one was like, I embraced my power and then that was good to go. And that was it, and,
Right.
there were stories and times where it had to happen again and again. And you had to keep reminding yourself that you deserve to be heard, or that you, whether it's reminding yourself or reminding others, right? And really making sure that you you experience that and you keep pushing for that, because there will be times where I would assume even the most powerful woman can feel weak, or can feel, I just heard a quote of Jane Fonda, who I consider to be someone who has truly embraced her power, and both in a like literal and figurative sense. And yet I imagine that there are days where she wakes up and she feels the 80 years of her life in her body, and she's like, you know she is kind of blah that day or something. And I'm the what I imagine happens, I don't know if this is at all accurate, but in my head, she has these sort of systems in place. Like I think it's important that we all do, where when you wake up feeling weak or vulnerable in some way, that you can tap into systems that you have in place to remind yourself that there is power in vulnerability, and to remind yourself who you are. So, I think that if anything, this season has reminded me that, you know, all women, even those who we look to as being really owning their own power, it's a process, and it's a never ending process, as everything, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think the one of the great things though about that is you don't lose the skills you've gained, right? So like even if you go sort of through the process and you're feeling great for a few months and then you fall off the wagon or whatever, or
Yeah.
you have a few months where you don't feel powerful or you don't embrace your power, or you feel like you've taken 5 steps backwards. You haven't lost the skills that you gained in those previous months. You've simply just stopped applying them. And so it's not as if, you have to start all over again. It's just picking those skills back up and reapplying them. And that's the part that I don't think I understood fully at earlier in my life. And so it would always feel like, oh God, I can't believe I have to do this all over again. But you don't really, right? You just have to start picking up those skills and applying them again. And that switch in thinking makes it far less daunting each time you feel like, oh, but I have to start all over from the beginning again. You're never really starting over from the beginning again. And that's why
Yeah.
I always, and I've said this on the podcast before, I'm always looking at life, and this might be too wooey for some people, but I'm always looking at life as if it's a spiral, right? Because it's never a straight line. It's never just like a linear process where you're going forward and backward. You're always sort of like going forward and backward, but in an upward direction. So like even if you're going backward, you're still
Yeah.
moving up, or
Well,
whatever direction you want to think of it in.
yeah, and there's muscle memory to all of those things.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
so like you said, you aren't going backwards. And I don't mean to, I know we're going to talk about the Courser challenge group that we have coming up in the new year. And so I don't mean to jump ahead, but there's a reason that a course that we have called Rethinking Resolution isn't like a month long, that it's a
Yeah.
full year, right? Because we expect people to the whole family gets taken down by the flu, or, there's a death in the family, or work gets really busy. People have lives and things happen, and like every day isn't always the day that you're embracing your power or that
Right.
you're working towards your goals.
Or it may not even be something as obvious as all of that. You may just feel depressed for a month, right?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
your anxiety may flare up, or you may not even know why, right?
Yeah.
Like
a
that,
hundred
like
percent.
I feel compelled to say that because people are always like, but nothing's even happening and I'm still going backwards. And like that happens to people. Like those
Well,
things
yeah.
occur in everyone's lives. And that is it, it is normal for that to happen. And people, I feel like we need to talk about that more often.
Well, and I think part of embracing your power is, we've talked about so much how it's part of acceptance, right? And
Right.
like accepting who you are. And that means also, if you truly accept who you are, you can be a person who isn't focusing on hitting those goals and hitting your marks every single day. In fact, you can not do it for 6 weeks, but you're still the person who was doing that and who can do that. And you can be both of those things at the same time. So you can be a person who's not doing it right now, but that person who did it is still there and they're waiting. And there's nothing wrong with waiting. I know I haven't talked about it in a long time, but one thing that has really helped me, and I'm hoping to, one of my goals for the new year is to pay more attention to it. Um, is, for women, and even if you're not like actively in the, if you're in menopause, it still works with like the seasons. Like every month, our body kind of goes through a cycle. And it's not just like, oh, I have cramps. There's a cycle, all 28 to 36 or 26 to 36 days, whatever it is for you. There is a cycle where there are days where you are like not able to focus on certain things. And even, Rielly, you sent me a text yesterday. You're like, hey, should I do this? I'm really like, I'm in the organizing mode.
Right.
And so I think when you accept that there's going to be days that you're not in an organizing mode, it allows you to then realize when days when you are and being like, oh, let me do that right now. Right. So and that's a shorter cycle, it's a month, but like as you become more aware and accepting of these cycles that you have, you are not only kinder to yourself in the sort of the slow cycles, but you are also um more able to jump at the ones where you're really on the ball, where you can say, oh, this is an organizing thing, a moment for me. So I think that, yeah, I think listening to everyone, we all have these seasons in life. And some people, their seasons are literally the seasons, right? Like winter is very hard for a lot of people. And that might not be the month that you're a go-getter. Like that might not be the time of year. Like, but maybe it is. Maybe it's when you learn to knit because you don't have to go anywhere. You can just stay
Right.
home. Like,
Right. Or you can adapt to how you function in these various seasons of your life, and whether it's the actual seasons of the year or the seasons of your life, right?
Yeah.
Like you can adapt your goals, if you want to call them goals, your resolutions, your plans, whatever you want to call them. You can adapt those to meet you where you are. And
Yeah.
so yeah, like and we are jumping ahead, but like when we're talking about rethinking resolutions, we talk about it in the sense of making them make sense for you. So, people make these grand plans and these big proclamations that they're going to do things. And by people, I mean myself included. Like, I would love to declutter my whole house, right? But if I say on January 1st, okay, in 2023, I'm going to declutter my entire house, it is not going to happen. Like that, it's just not because I haven't made a sensible goal, right? I've just said the words, I'm going to declutter my house. I haven't broken that down into steps. I haven't figured out how am I going to accomplish that. I haven't made a goal that makes sense for me. And so unless we're thinking about things in terms that work for how our particular mindset works, that work for, in a systemic way that will actually change the way our household, like in that instance, our household functions, right? Because I could declutter my whole house in a week, but then my messy, messy family will just come and clutter it all back up again.
Right.
Like if we haven't figured out a system that works, none of it matters. So the point of all of this, of course, is that you have to learn to listen to yourself. You have to learn to understand yourself. You have to do all the groundwork first. And that's what we're talking about. We do need to take a break. Tova, I know you had something to add, so I'll let you do that. And then we'll
Yeah, we
take a
can.
break and come back in and talk about the questions we had.
Well, and all I was going to say was, even if you are the person who's like, I'm decluttering the whole house this weekend, and then your family comes home and it's clutter everywhere. Um, Decluttering that weekend was still not a waste because next time, instead of spending time going, okay, do I put this paper here or this paper there? You know where it goes because you've done it before. So, that's the other thing is like, there's not really any like, and maybe this is the key to embracing our power or whatever. Like, no day is a waste,
Mm.
right? Like, no lesson is a day waste. Feeling weak is not a bad thing. Failure is not a waste. It just is. It just is. And just the real quick, not that we need another example, but it always reminds me when we talk about things like this in muscle memory. The first time I did Whole30, which if you don't know, it's like you basically eat meat and vegetables and fruit, essentially.
Yeah, it's like an elimination diet, basically.
Yeah. And I've done it a couple of times because I do feel really good. And we can have another conversation about it, but it is a good reminder to me how much I attach food to like events and celebration. Which I've now don't think is that bad of a thing, but it's nice check-in once in a while. Anyway, I haven't done it in many years, but the first time I did it, probably 5, 6 days, my body was like, where's the sugar? I want the sugar. Where is the sugar? I need the sugar. And then the second time, maybe it was 2 or 3 days. And the third time I did it, my body was like, oh, cool. Okay, so this is what we're doing now. Great. Like, it's amazing how your body is so quick to adapt once it's done it once before. And I think we are all too. And so if you're like, well, I set resolutions every year and I do really well the first month and then it just falls off. And it's like, well, okay. But like, then the things that work and the things that don't. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to adapt them to your life. And I think all of that and accepting who you are is how you can embrace your power. So let's take a quick break. And then I guess we'll come back to our questions. Tova here. I'll admit, when I think of a coach, I immediately think knee-high socks, whistles, and clipboards. Is it because I love Ted Lasso?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's a good look for you, if I'm being honest.
Thanks, I think. Anyway, that's not the kind of coaching we want to talk to you all about.
True. We are talking about life and transition coaching, though I do still love a clipboard and a tube sock.
Both Riley and I are lucky to have worked with incredible coaches throughout our lives.
Before that, though, we struggled with where to start, believing in what coaching could really do for us, and of course, putting ourselves first.
Taking the leap and working with our coaches made all the difference. They gave us direction and support when we needed it most.
Now, we are fortunate enough to be coaches ourselves, and we're excited to pay it forward.
We can help you figure out where to start, create a roadmap, keep you accountable, and get to living your limitless life.
Sounds pretty great. So if you want to figure out your next steps, check out our services at goboldlyinitiative.com/services.
We can't wait to talk to you. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. I am going to take advantage of not being the person to talk to ask you to answer the first question, because despite the fact that this has been a 14-week season, I don't know that I have an answer to this question. So I am excited to kick it over to you.
Fantastic.
So do you remember the first time that you felt powerful?
So I've thought about this question obviously a lot because we've asked it so many times and we wrote these questions, right? And I don't know if I remember the very first time I felt powerful in particular, but I know as a kid, the things that caused me to feel powerful were not necessarily healthy. Like, yeah, like getting really good grades always made me feel powerful because people would notice that I was, like smart, and that seemed to be something that was good. Um, and from which I could derive some like degree of power. I don't know that that's healthy though. I did find as a kid that I would feel powerful when I was connected to nature. And I've talked about that experience on the show before a couple times, I think. And because I grew up, in the middle of nowhere, when I was very young, I spent a lot of time outside in the middle of nowhere. And that experience, I think, was powerful for me in that it connected me very deeply to nature and to my environment. And so that caused me to feel powerful in a spiritual way. And I don't mean to say that like it's a question. It's more like I don't know how to explain it to other people and in a way that will make sense. So I think when I was really young, that's when I felt powerful. When I was older, there were times where I felt powerful, like in there I remember being in high school and I read or I didn't read, but I was asked to do, you know, public speaking for the first time, and I did, and it went really well, and people were like, "Oh wow." And that felt really powerful that I could move people with words out loud. And that was something that made me feel like, "Oh wow, I can actually cause people to feel something with the words that come out of my mouth," right? And surprise, here we are on a podcast talking. So that I think probably like as an older person, that's the part of me that feels the most connected to my power is when I can cause people to feel something, like to engage with their own feelings and to experience an emotion, or connect with their own emotions. That really makes me feel like connected to my own power. So when I'm public speaking, when I'm working for a cause, when I'm, like when I'm advocating, and no surprise, I became a lawyer thinking I was going to be an advocate, which, as we all know, didn't go exactly as I had planned. But, when I have worked with people on becoming politicians. And so when I've helped women figure out that they have more power than they thought they had, that like aha moment for them is a real feeling of power for me, because I've gotten people to see like that they have more inside them than they thought they had. And that feeling for me is huge. So those I think are and they're both, and just to follow up on our questions, we always ask people if it's more physical or if it's emotional, and it's both for me. I get like a very big rush of feeling inside of me. Like I get like it goes straight from my stomach up through my chest. And but it's also like I get an emotional like rush from it. I get very excited. Um, so that's my answer. What about you, Tova?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been looking back on, childhood experiences, and I think that there's certainly times that moments that I felt powerful, and yet I can kind of sense there was always an anxiety there, right? Like right underneath. So I don't know how powerful truly felt. I do, um, I do think I used to play, I still play it, but just not nearly as often as I'd like. I was a good oboe player in high school and, when you're in college and when you're performing and you have a solo or something, there's not room for anxiety. And it also wasn't the bad anxiety, it was like the good anxiety, right? And so I think that is probably like when I would do that really, really well, that would that would be that feeling. But as I look like through my whole life, I think it was more like flashes of that feeling. And similar to what you were saying, it's any time where I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I
Yeah.
mean supposed to in like a good way, like
Yep.
what I'm truly meant to be doing. So whether it was playing the oboe or whether it was um even going to law school, like I loved law school. I mean, there was a lot of anxiety wrapped up into everything else, but like making that decision to go to law school. Or like you said, like when I am involved in a cause or when I'm helping someone be who they want to be, right? Like and whatever that looks like, I do think that what being who I'm supposed to be is where there's power. And I will continue to the next question. Well, I'll answer yes, it is physical. Like there can be like a rush, like a physical rush of excitement and that high. And like there's a performance high, right? But that's like I kind of feel that even if I'm not performing. And like you said, public speaking or um, you know, being it's kind of one of the fun things about sales, right? Is because you are being persuasive and somebody will buy something. And I'm able to be in an industry where I only really sell people stuff that I think they need. So like I don't feel like I'm doing anything sketchy. But then when they do decide that they need it too, and it's because you've been persuasive, that is a thrill. I will say, going to the next question of when do you feel the weakest? It is when I'm being dishonest. And it is either when I am being dishonest to others around me. For many, many years, I was in a position where little white lies became the norm, and they can be exhausting and crushing. And I don't know how you feel powerful when you are under the weight of, pretending, but also lies to yourself when you're not being honest with yourself. Because if you're not being honest, if I'm not being honest with myself and I'm doing something that I don't really want to be, but I'm still doing it, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I can't be in my power. But those experiences of the dishonesty, like I said, whether it is to myself, and I don't know how much we've talked about this on the podcast or if it's just been conversations that Rielly and I have had. I know we just talked about it in our circle the other day, but I am masterful at creating a lovely bubble around me and pretending things are okay and putting the things that I don't want to look at in a box. And sometimes it's conscious, and a lot of times over the years it's been unconscious. And so in the last couple of years, it has taken work to make sure, because my default is to put something in a box. And so it has taken effort to make sure I don't do that. Um, and so the dishonesty can really be, I think pretending is the best word to describe it.
Yeah.
So I can keep talking, but when do you feel the weakest?
I would tend to agree with what you said. I think the the weakest I've ever felt is when I have been unwilling to be honest about who I am. And when I have tried to change who I am in order to fit someone else's needs or to satisfy what I thought other people needed me to be, or that sort of thing, right? Even if it's not what other people needed me to be, but just what I thought they needed me to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so trying to fit a role that I was unsuited to, or that just didn't work for me in whatever way. And that's I think a lot of us fall into that trap, right? Of trying to meet other people's needs before understanding what we ourselves need. And I will say and I think a lot of people do this, I spent a lot of time lying about who I was and who I am. And not not big lies, not like,
Right.
this, like, that's not my name, and that's not my birthday, or like, not the big lies. It's those little lies that you tell other people about yourself to make yourself seem like more palatable, right? Or the things that you do to be more accommodating or be more pleasant, which is a word I hate. And to make yourself fit in somebody else's life more pleasantly, and or in a job more efficiently, or in a school environment more efficiently, or whatever it is. The ways in which we squeeze ourselves into a position we're not meant to be in, and that we follow a purpose and a path that is not ours because we think we're supposed to or we ought to. And we've talked about this before, but it follows now. Those are the times I've felt the weakest because I was the weakest. I was
Yeah.
not myself. And we are the strongest when we are being ourselves. And it took a lot of therapy and work and internal effort to overcome that urge. And it's still something I have to work on all the time because it's a learned behavior to try to fit in, whatever way. And
Well,
so,
yeah.
yeah, I think that's for me, certainly.
And let's be clear, we haven't talked about this much this season, but that feeling of needing to be nice and pleasant to fit in, and it has the end result is you feeling weak because you're not connected with who you are. Not to say that you're not a kind person or, a delight, but um that is a long con perpetuated by the patriarchy and white supremacy to keep people away from their own power. Like the reason that we as women feel that there are certain behaviors that we need to be in order to fit in, and then B, those behaviors just happen to be the ones that take us away from our own power.
What
None
a
of that is a
surprise.
coincidence, right? So I mean, we haven't talked about that this season overtly. We haven't had like an episode specifically about it,
Right.
but I think it is important to know that um, it's there, and it's there on purpose, right? So just this week, just yesterday, the Afghani government determined, or Taliban determined, that women could no longer go to college, university. And my son asked me about it, and he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I said it's about control, and it's about being threatened, and a variety of things. And that is an extreme case, but also being told." I mean, skirts, for the love of Pete, skirts are a way to keep women from their power. It's just harder to do stuff in them. Like, it is harder to be powerful when you're wearing a skirt. Now, I think that many women have taken back their power in amazing skirts. So I don't think it's worked in the end. But I think that a lot of these things that we both described as pretending is was part of the plan, is part of the plan. And so I just wanted to highlight that just so in case anyone's wondering, or in case you're like, oh, I feel that way too.
Yeah.
I think women in general, not to say that men don't have a similar experience. I think it just is not necessarily pushed by society as much on them.
Yeah. No, I agree. Um, so how do you manage your feelings of vulnerability then? What do you do?
So I don't necessarily equate, because I'm working really hard on not pretending
Yes.
and being honest. I no longer equate vulnerability with weakness. And um, I manage my vulnerability by allowing myself to be vulnerable. And I find that there is honesty, and I obviously equate honesty and acceptance with power. And so with my power. And so I find that there is honesty in letting yourself be vulnerable and asking for help when you need it, not turning help away. And I think it can even be honest. You can say, this is making me uncomfortable, but I know it's what I need to do. Or our family has been through a difficult season the last couple of weeks, and people have offered to help. And I have said, honestly, I would love to accept your help. I don't know what I need. And so I think that just allowing myself to be vulnerable, allowing myself to take help when it's offered, to ask for help when it's needed, and to just be honest in my vulnerability and not pretend it doesn't exist. I think a big problem that I had through the fall was pretending I wasn't stressed around my kids. There was a lot of just little stressors that were happening, and I was really trying to pretend that I wasn't. And what was happening was I was snapping at my kids, having a shorter temper with them for things that were entirely unrelated to them. And it it hurt them. And had I been willing to be more open and not give them burdens that kids don't need to carry, but just be more open and be more vulnerable, even with them, would have hopefully eliminated some of their confusion and misunderstanding that I had thought that they were doing something wrong. Right. And so it's a work in progress, but for me, embracing my feelings of vulnerability and embracing my power are almost one and the same. What about you?
This is a tougher one for me. When I was uh growing up, I was taught not to feel. And so because, I'm very sensitive and I was told by most extended family members that I was too sensitive. And so when and not like once, right? Like on repeat. And so any expression of emotion was pretty much disallowed. And so all of my experience of vulnerability has been equated with weakness. And so I have worked very hard to change that in my life. And so for anyone else out there listening, this is me being vulnerable. Welcome. It's uncomfortable. And I want to like rewind and erase what I just said. Because it's so uncomfortable. And also in my family, sarcasm was like the go-to. And that's what I've learned. And now at like, however old I am, because I can never remember, somewhere in my 40s. And I'm not joking. I honestly can never remember because I think we've talked about that on the show. Like my short-term memory is terrible. Um, I, I think that the way that I deal with being vulnerable is just trying to allow it to wash over me and not stop it from happening. Like that's the phase that I'm at in vulnerability is like, okay, this is happening. And that's, like that's where I get to. And I'm not particularly good at asking for help. It makes me extraordinarily uncomfortable. Um, if people offer help, I am much better at being like, okay, I can say yes to help, but I am not good at reaching out and asking. And so there are people in my life now where I am close enough to them that I can reach out and ask. And so my advice for anyone else who is similarly situated is to find those people where you can be comfortable enough that you can say, hey, like something is wrong in my current season of my life. I need to talk, or like I just need to go out and blow off some steam, or, you know, whatever it is that you want to do to get through whatever situation you're in. Um, and that really for me has been the key is to find those couple of people that I can actually be vulnerable around because I am never going to be the person who is vulnerable around everybody. That's just not who I
Right.
am and that's never going to happen and I am okay with that. Like I don't need to be vulnerable with everyone I meet. And neither does anyone else. So that's not I don't think that's what either of us are suggesting. It's
Right.
but it is good to find, I think, a couple of people who you can talk to and be honest with and be open with because it is relieving to be able to say to like your friend, "Oh my God, can you believe this just happened? Like I got to talk to you."
Yeah, I will also say I did like I really did things differently in the last couple of weeks. So when somebody asked like how I was doing, I wasn't like, great. I would be like, okay, we're going through some stuff or whatever. And I didn't share what we were going through because there were people that didn't know me well enough to share with them. But I even had signed up for something at school that I really wanted to participate in and volunteer in. And I just realized there was no way for so many reasons. There was no way I was going to be able to do it. And I sent an email at the beginning of the week and I said, listen, we're going through something and I just can't be there and I'm really sorry. And I don't know this person well enough to know what they would normally react. So I don't know if it was my vulnerability that did something or if this person is just wonderful. But they were basically like, okay, like that was it. Like there was no, and I think that it is important to remember that, yes, we don't have to share everything with everyone. I would discourage you from doing that. But that people are human and a lot of people, yes, there are people who won't be supportive, but um when you and we've talked about this before, but when you are vulnerable, you are giving other people the permission to be vulnerable too. And that could be helping them be more honest about what they're going through. And it could be helping them be more aligned with their power. And you have no idea. And it's not really your business if that's what's happening. That's not why you're doing it. But when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and be like, I'm not okay, and or we're going to be okay, but we're working through something. I think we are giving other people permission to do the same thing, and I think that is powerful in a way as well. So I think that it's a hard lesson, right? Because we were taught to be nice and pleasant and that girls were weak, but so we don't want to be weak, but then somehow we create vulnerability to weakness. It's all very confusing.
It
Um,
is.
but I do think that it is something that we can work on and we can practice. You know, we can we're a work in progress.
Yeah, for sure.
which maybe is a good place to take a break, because I think the fact that, if Sophia Bush hadn't named her podcast Work in Progress, we could have named our podcast Work in Progress. Because it always seems to be that we end every season going, yeah, we're going to keep working on this.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
But I think we want to end the season with a high note and talk about what's next and, what we have coming up and what we're excited about. So let's take a break and then we'll be right back.
In case you didn't already know, we love talking.
True story. More than simply talking, we love researching, prepping, and bringing this podcast to life.
We launched We Go Boldly with the goal of reaching people dealing with the kinds of questions and concerns that we also face.
Things like how to hear my inner voice, how to make sure my habits are worth it and stick, how do I feel my feelings and still manage to function?
After years of personal work and lots of trial and error, we realized we have a lot to share on these topics.
Now we've been broadcasting for over a year, and we are proud of our podcast.
And to no one's surprise, we still have a lot to say and talk about.
We sure do. We need your help to keep going. Every episode takes time and money to create, and we would love your support.
So, if you like what we are doing, please support us by joining our Patreon community and becoming a monthly subscriber.
Join our Patreon community today at patreon.com/wegoboldly. We are so grateful to all of our supporters. Now, back to the show. Welcome back. So if you are listening to this on the day that it dropped, I believe it's December 28th, which means we are just mere days away from a new year, new you. No, I'm just kidding. I hate that. Rielly looked up startled at me, like, what is she doing?
No.
No. But it is a new year, and a lot of people use that as a guidepost to sort of check in on themselves. It's that kind of time of year where it's like, I know, Rielly, you use your birthday because it's kind of close to the end of the year.
I do often use my birthday as a check-in point because it's not the new year and it's something I usually remember. So
right.
it's
And my
helpful.
birthday is conveniently about halfway through the year, so I kind of use it as like a double check.
Yeah.
But we are excited. I don't know what we're sharing. I don't know if we're sharing about our new season. We know what our new season is going to be.
Yeah.
Are
So
we sharing that?
yeah, we can share that. So we have two exciting things going on. We are going to launch a new season in February. So we're going to take a little break in January, you guys, and we're going to put up some of our favorite episodes, interviews for you guys to enjoy, look back on, reflect some of the things that we have talked about that we think are like the most important, most useful, most helpful tools, tips, tricks, all the good stuff that we want you guys to have a look back at and think about before we dive into a brand new season in February of 2023. So that's what's coming up in January. But in February, we have a new season and we have a year-long group challenge. And we're really excited about this group challenge. Oh, well, I am. I'm pretty sure Tovah is too.
Well, I mean, if you haven't noticed that I keep sending you things off of Instagram going like, oh, we should talk about this. Oh, we should talk about this.
So, you've heard us talk about resolutions and goals and all this stuff. And we feel like we need a group for ourselves and we need a group for you guys. And so as we've said on this episode a couple times, we're starting a group challenge. It's called Rethinking Resolutions. And you can join right now. You can sign up right now and reserve your spot. And the group challenge is going to be a place where you can set a goal, and we're going to help you figure out how to set a goal that makes sense for you. So not, as we talked about before, not just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks, right? Like we're going to set goals that make sense and we're going to set goals that you can achieve. And then you're going to get invited to a group chat on WhatsApp. And every single day, you're going to get something from me or Tova, and it's going to help motivate you to stick to your goals. One of the things that we know from the science, from anecdotal experience, from our personal life experience, is that without support and without, some sort of accountability, goals generally don't get met. So that's part of what happens in this group challenge is that you get the support you need to make sure you reach the goals that you set for yourself. So we're
Yeah,
pretty excited about that.
we are. And like, we're excited because we're using the word goals, but because we like goals, but also like we are going to be just as focused on the process,
Yeah.
if not more so, to be perfectly honest, than getting to that end result. And part of that is because so at the beginning, a lot of the conversation is going to be about picking the goals, right? And how we select our goals and what is underlying our goals. And like I just sent Rielly a something where someone was talking about manifesting and like you can only control what you can control. And so we're going to have some conversations about making sure our goals are actually within our ability to reach, and making sure that we really understand the motivation for why they are a goal and what we want to achieve with those goals. And so the process though is going to be where the magic happens, because there will be goals that people will meet. There will be goals that people exceed. There will be goals that halfway through the year, if somebody's like, I don't think this is a good goal for me anymore. And then there will be goals that we'll fail on. But there's progress in the process. We can say it that way. And so it, obviously we want to help people, achieve what they want to achieve, but this isn't just about hitting a goal to check it off. Although I'm all for setting goals just so you get something like easy to check off at the beginning of the year. I 100% do that. I think
Yes.
it's really
Yep.
motivating. So, but we're also about figuring out what motivates people. And when I mean people in general, we know what motivates people in general. What motivates you specifically?
Right.
Because it is entirely possible that someone has never thought about what motivates them and they've tried 8 different things and it never works and they don't understand why it doesn't work. And it could simply be because if you have kids, if you have interactions with other human beings, you know that people are motivated by different things, right? Like a sticker chart works wonders for my oldest son, and my youngest son would probably scribble on it and my middle son would throw it out. So, all of those kids are motivated by different things. I think my youngest son is only motivated by Legos. But it's a matter of finding out what you're motivated by and then putting the pieces in place. And the other thing that I think is so important is it is a 365-day group. Like I said, it's not a month-long group. This is not something where it's going to be in and out and quick, because a lot of people can do things for 30 days. I cannot eat sugar or bread or, hummus for 30 days.
Right.
But I don't want to do that indefinitely. If my goal was to keep that up forever, I would fail. And so we want to figure out systems or ways to help you succeed at reaching your goals, but also succeed beyond the 365 days. And for whatever success looks like. I know one of my big focuses next year, because I just feel better when I do this, is making sure I stay more creative and do more creative things. This was something that I was better at actually during the pandemic when we didn't go anywhere. And I've really not done as well this past year. And I want to figure out a way to both be able to see other human beings and do creative things. That's like putting the two together. And so, I think that obviously we're like super excited about this, but it is a good It's actually it feels so natural coming out of this particular season.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And it's going to wrap around our season 8 because in season 8, we're going to start talking about the science of all of this stuff, right? We're going to, season 8, we're calling, well, we haven't figured out the
I was
name
gonna say, what are
entirely.
we calling it?
We're calling, I know, Tova got excited. Season 8 is all about, I'm going to say doing it, which sounds terrible, but
Oh
it
yeah.
is, but it's about doing things. Like, what is the science behind motivation and getting things done and accomplishing what we want to accomplish? And so that's what we're talking about in season 8. It's inspired by season 7. So
And
once we
Nike,
and
obviously.
Nike, obviously, once we embrace our power, right? Like, then what? Okay.
And, yeah,
Then what are we doing?
and also just doing it or doing it in a world where we value rest,
Yes.
we value kindness to ourselves. We are not looping back to the busy season to talk about, okay, we spent a lot of time talking about how not to be busy, and now we're going to spend a season on how to be busy.
No.
We want to talk about how to do things that you want to do, what keeps you from doing them, but also sleeping and resting and valuing yourself and valuing your relationships and all of these things that oftentimes, I mean, we see it in the Hallmark movie tropes, although not so much this year. They're really breaking out of their molds. But with the busy, successful person who has big goals and big achievements and no friends,
Right.
right? That's a trope, but it's a trope for a reason.
Yeah.
And so we are going to have, conversations about both helping you achieve doing the things, but then also still being a whole person.
Yeah. Because we're gonna talk about goal setting in terms of goal setting for achievement, but goal setting for fun, right? Like, goal setting is not just about quote success. Goal setting is also about living. You can
Yep.
set goals that have nothing to do with what somebody defines as success. You can set goals like, I want to learn how to paint, right? I want to learn how to ride a bike if I don't know how yet. Or whatever you want to do. It has
Somebody, and I mean this person, is getting calligraphy pens in her stocking this year.
so as you can see, the goal setting group, and it's rethinking resolutions, 365 days. And again, you can sign up and reserve your spot on our website right now. Um, the goal setting, rethinking resolutions group, and the season are working in conjunction to help us and you figure out how to work through 2023 and come out with a a, a, a limitless life, which is what we always talk about. I don't know why I'm laughing, because we planned it that way. So, like,
Like,
I'm
man, this is
surprised.
really coming together.
I'm like surprised by our own cleverness. Um, so we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. That's our goal for it, is to make it fun and exciting and interesting and motivational and uplifting. And if you think back to what I said personally about when I feel powerful, it's when I get to motivate people to reach their own potential. And that's my goal with this group, is to help people reach their potential, whether it's a fun goal, a quote success goal, a serious goal, whatever it is. Like, that is when I feel like I'm serving my purpose in life. And so it might sound cheesy, you might not believe me, but it 100% accurate of where I know my purpose is in life. So I hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but still a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us for this last year.
yeah.
It's been pretty exciting. It's
Yes.
been quite a year. And if you are listening to this and you, even though we tell you not to, or decide to make a resolution, which we discourage, but just in case you are, we in the group will be talking about goal setting and breaking goals up into little pieces and stacking and all of these great things and tools. But I will leave you with saying that the one consistent way, if you're not doing all of those things, the one consistent way resolutions can be successful is if they are fun. So it does not matter how wonderful your motivation is and how important your motivation is. If you cannot figure out a fun way to floss your teeth, you never will. And I can attest to that because I've yet to figure out a way to make it fun. So just, keep that in mind, that when we talk about fun, it's because it's important. Fun is important. Laughing is important. Fun is important, and it's important to us, but it's also important to the whole person. So I will say thank you so much for joining us this year. It has been quite a exciting ride.
We will see you in 2023. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.